couple brief excerpts out of Plato's Republic, Book 10, on poets, and artists. When he is by himself, he will not mind saying or doing many things which he would be ashamed of anyone hearing or seeing him do. True, this is a principle of law and reason in him which bids him resist, as well as a feeling of his misfortune which is forcing him to indulge his sorrow. True, but when a man is drawn in two opposite directions to and from the same object, this, as we affirm, necessarily implies two distinct principles in him. Certainly, one of them is ready to follow the guidance of the law. How do you mean? The law would say that to be patient under suffering is best, and that we should not give way to impatience, as there is no knowing whether such things are good or evil, and nothing is gained by impatience. So, because no human thing is of serious importance, the grief stands in the way of that which is at the moment is most required. What is most required, he asked? That we should take counsel about what has happened, and when the dice have been thrown, order our affairs in the way which reason deems best, not like children who have had a fall, keeping hold of the part struck and wasting time in setting up a howl, but always accustoming the soul forthwith to apply a remedy, raising up that which is sickly and fallen, banishing the cry of sorrow by the healing art. Yes, he said, that is the true way of meeting the attacks of fortune. Yes, I said, and the higher principle is ready to follow this suggestion of reason, clearly, and the other principle which inclines us to recollection of our troubles and to lamentation, and can never have enough of them, we may call irrational, useless, and cowardly. Indeed we may. And does not the latter, I mean the rebellious principle, furnish a great variety of materials for imitation, whereas the wise and calm temperament, being always nearly equable, is not easy to imitate or to appreciate when imitated, especially at a public festival when a promiscuous crowd is assembled in a theater, for the feeling represented is one to which they are strangers. Certainly. Then the imitative poet who aims at being popular is not by nature made, nor is his art intended to please or to affect the rational principle in the soul, but he will prefer the passionate and fitful temper which is easily imitated. Clearly. And how we may fairly take him and place him by the side of the painter. I'm skip down here. But we have not yet brought forward the heaviest counts in our accusation, the power which poetry has of harming even the good, and there are very few who are not harmed. This surely an awful thing. Yes, certainly, if the effect is what you say. Hear and judge. The best of us, as I conceive when I listen to a passage of Homer or one of the tragedians, in which he represents some pitiful hero who is drawling out his sorrows in a long oration, or weeping and smiting his breast, the best of us, you know, delight in giving way to sympathy, and are enraptured at the excellence of the poet who stirs our feelings most. Yes, of course, I know. But when any sorrow of our own happens to us, then you may observe that we pride ourselves on the opposite quality. We would fain be quiet and patient. This is the manly part, and the other which delighted us in the recitation is now deemed to be the part of a woman. Very true, he said. Now, can we be right in praising and admiring another who is doing that which any of us would abominate and be ashamed of in his own person? No, he said, that is certainly not reasonable. Nay, I said, quite reasonable from one point of view. What point of view? If you consider, I said, that when in misfortune we feel a natural hunger and desire to relieve our sorrow by weeping and lamentation, and that this feeling, which is kept under control in our own calamities, is satisfied and delighted by the poets, The better nature in each of us, not having been sufficiently trained by reason or habit, allows the sympathetic element to break loose because the sorrow is another's, and the spectator fancies that there can be no disgrace to him in praising and pitying anyone who comes telling him what a good man he is, and making a fuss about his troubles. He thinks that the pleasure is a gain, and why should he be superclicious, and lose this and the poem too? Few persons ever reflect, as I should imagine, that from the evil of other men something of evil is communicated to themselves. And so the feeling of sorrow which has gathered strength at the sight of the misfortunes of others is with difficulty repressed in our own. How very true! And does not the same hold also for the ridiculous? There are jests which you would be ashamed of to make yourself, and yet on the comic stage, or indeed in private, when you hear them, you are greatly amused by them, and are not at all disgusted in their unseemliness. The case of pity is repeated. There is a principle in human nature which is disposed to raise a laugh, and this which you once restrained by reason, because you were afraid of being thought a buffoon, is now let out again, and having stimulated the risible faculty at the theater, you are betrayed unconsciously to yourself into playing the comic poet at home. Quite true, he said. And the same may be said of lust and anger and all the other affections of desires and pain and pleasure, which are held to be inseparable from every action. In all of them poetry feeds and waters the passions instead of drying them up. She lets them rule, although they ought to be controlled, if mankind are ever to increase in happiness and virtue. I cannot deny it. My take on that is there seems to be very clear awareness that poetry has a very specific function, and it is clearly articulated to be a contrary function to the, they want to call it productivity of the Republic, but in one sense to the effect on the psychology of people from the Republic. They're doing the same thing the modern scientists do today when they're looking for something. They're looking at it from the standpoint that the Republic is, by their design, supreme, good, just, and right. Therefore, any counter forces, like as nice as the Native Americans were, they saved the lives of the pilgrims, they fed them, they clothed them, they gave them land, they taught them how to survive, and we all know the story. They turned and they massacred them. Because despite the human qualities that were expressed by the Native Americans and the superior character, moral character, if you want to call moral characters, which were expressed specifically in demonstrations of compassion and empathy, were then deemed to be evil and a justification for the extermination of as many as possible. And when the extermination was seen to be a difficult process, then there was the Kill the Indian, Save the Man program. But it's very important, and I am proudly a poet, because this guy recognizes the most destructive force to your liberty, and liberty only exists within the confines, the cage of the Republic. Because liberty, the root word being liber, which God is a symbol of a hard cock, a dick, which is a male chauvinistic identity that goes along with the tradition of the denigration of women, and they'll hold that, oh, but Plato said that women were supposed to be equal with men. Yes, that wasn't true in his time. That wasn't true in any Western civilization ever founded on the face of this planet in any point in history, on any continent, under any the constructs of any religion. Even in modern day Israel right now, women are mandated by Israeli law that when a man gets on the bus, if the seat are full, she has to get up for the man. And this is even in Israel today, 2014. So I just want to be very clear that they are very clear. Poetry is a horrific threat to the power structure, specifically because what they call reason and logic and all of this nice stuff is actually the brutal impact of trauma. Of trauma. It's the degradation of human ingenuity and creativity. And like they say, in the crowd, the herd mentality, you won't act the same as when you're by yourself based on the fear and shame. It's a traumatic control experience in which your liberty is constructed under your ability to replicate. And they talk about poetry as imitation, but the only way to survive in a republic is to be normal. And the very definition of normal is to conform to a type or a standard. It is not to behave in the natural state of which one's instinct drives them. Normal is contrary to human ingenuity, imagination, and self-awareness. Self-awareness in all of those that is why it's critical to have a constitution, because a constitution is a weapon that attacks the individuality of a human brain while saying that you have all these free rights based on what it gives you. If you get outside the Constitution, are you free? Are you freer or are you less free? So, I will continue to dig into this republic and resist civil government. While I'm on it, I might as well take advantage of the thing. And this is Machiavelli the Prince, and this is out of this little section right here. And this is the whole essence of a republic. The chief foundation of all states, whether new, old, or mixed, are good laws and good arms, as there cannot be good laws where there are not good arms, and where there are good arms, there must be good laws. I will not now discuss the laws, but I will speak of the arms. They couldn't have slavery unless they had a massive amount of brute force. They couldn't prevent women from voting without the application of massive amounts of brute force. And just like today, I should like to be noted that in the Britannica Dictionary of Funk, the very definition of republic is that the republic cannot exist in an empire. But in Barack Obama's speech to Fort Bragg at the close of the Iraq War, his own statement verbatim, and I believe this is the first time ever in the history of the United States, and it's crazy because the conservative Tea Party people that say Barack Obama's at war with the republic, in one sense, if they were to actually educationally apply some knowledge, they might even be able to construct an argument based on the fact that he said, and unlike empires of old, we didn't do it for the resources, alluding to the notion he perceives being the head of a state of an empire, which according to the Britannica Dictionary, no republic can exist inside of an empire, because an empire survives, as this goes earlier on, it said in another book, off of anarchy. When brute force rules above the rule of law, and one group of people can use arms to assert their interests, that is anarchy. When a powerful government can bomb, destroy, invade, kill, perform sporadic attacks, even if they're training on civilians of the population of another legalized, legal construct nation, that is anarchy. Anarchy is fundamental for an empire, because the very essence of an empire is the absence of freedom, if that's what you want to call it, or liberty, which is also that of a republic. Because like Machiavelli, if you understand what this is saying, it's saying the very purpose of a republic, of a civil government, is the manufacture of military forces, which means that the entire fetish of a republic is focused primarily on one thing, and that is the bond between a mother and a child, because unless you can sever that bond, you cannot build a military. And poetry, the poetry waters and and focuses on the bond, whether it's there or not. And if people realize, if men realize that what it costs, the cost for them to be militarized is the very relationship that they have with their mother, which is their life, that might upset them. So it's very important to not allow poetry, real poetry, the poetry that is reflective and draws passions and understands sorrow and weeps and cries with the moaning of the people around you. If that poetry takes root, for the Romans did in these cases what all wise princes should do, who consider not only present but also future discords and diligently guard against them. For being foreseen, they can easily be remedied. But if one waits till they are at hand, the medicine is no longer in time, as the malady has become incurable. It happening with this as with those hectic fevers, as doctors say, which at their beginning are easy to cure but difficult to recognize, but in course of time, when they have not at first been recognized and treated, become easy to recognize and difficult to cure. Thus it happens in matters of state, for knowing afar off, which it is only given to a prudent man to do, the evils that are brewing, they are easily cured. But when, for want of such knowledge, they are allowed to grow so that everyone can recognize them, there is no longer any remedy to be found. Therefore the Romans, observing disorders while yet remote, were always able to find a remedy and never allow them to increase, in order to avoid a war, which means sustain oppression and their control. For they knew that war is not to be avoided and can be deferred only to the advantage of the other side. They therefore declared war against Philip and da 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 da. So the case being, this is like the whole thing with Martin Luther King. Martin Luther King never made it past basically a juvenilistic understanding of the society in which he lived. And it was, his graduation was when he became anti-war, and the effects of him going anti-war, which is a fundamental part of the republic, but he hadn't got deep enough to recognize. He was still dependent on pleading for state-sanctioned support and presidents, that as he went through that process and became more aware about the totality of the situation, that's when it's, let's get it out of the way. But what he accomplished was he only reiterated the power of the state by relying on the republic to provide the things that they needed, that he felt the people deserved within the confines of the republic. When he went anti-war, he started to actually question the structure of the republic, but his religious ties made it very difficult for him to see past his nose for the most part. So poetry, it's in poetry is the key. Poetry is I am the hydrogen bomb poet. I am Plato's Republic's death poet. I will die and my blood will soak the lines of my poems, and they will saturate the minds of the people that the Republic seeks to prevent from discovering what it really means to be who they are. And it means a lot more than just being human. Human is a very limited construct of who we are. So whether you like me or not, I'm here for destruction. Call me whatever the hell you want. I bring death. The end of the republic is behind my eyes, is beneath my tongue, pulsates through my heart, and is carried into my capillaries.